Hi, my name is Federico Pianzola, and I'm a researcher in digital humanities at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And today I'd like to share with you some ideas about storytelling in the metaverse. Why stories are important in the metaverse? Because everybody loves stories. I'm sure you too, every day, engage with many different kinds of stories. We love stories so much that nowadays there are so many different formats that we don't have even enough time to enjoy them all. Books, dramas, films, comics, video games, but also TV shows, webtoons, and even YouTube videos and Instagram stories. Stories are so important for human life that a famous science fiction writer, Ursula Le Guin, once said, "There have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories." In the metaverse, it's not going to be different. Storytelling will still be one of the activities that make life better. But how will storytelling in the metaverse look like? Today, I will show you a few ideas that I have. They involve the use of artificial intelligence in interaction with human creativity. Before going into AI and the metaverse, let's take a look at what other options we have. We now have many different media and formats, but telling stories has been for the most part of human history an oral activity. Even after printed novels started to spread around the year 1700 in Europe, listening to stories remained the most common way of imagining the lives of characters in imaginary worlds. Printed books became extremely popular only at the later stage, and their popularity is now declining. Written stories are part of what can be called the Gutenberg parenthesis. Johannes Gutenberg was a German goldsmith who invented the printing press, an improved version of the movable metal type of print invented in Korea earlier. Since the moment in which his invention facilitated the spreading of books, only 500 years of human history have been marked by this very particular way of telling stories in written form. Before that, voice was the most popular medium. And now we live in an era in which multimediality is the most popular form of communication and storytelling, mixing oral and written form with audiovisual elements as well. So if we look at the evolution of storytelling, stories were once told mostly orally, then in written form, the Gutenberg parenthesis, and now mostly in multimedia form. This graph is a simplified visualization of this evolution. You see that the dominance of writing represents only 1% of the time passed since the dawn of human language. Now the situation has already changed, as I said, starting with the invention of the radio and then of cinematography. The popularity of oral and multimedia stories started to rise, and stories in which audiovisual elements have a dominant role have been reaching far more people than books. We cannot ignore the context in which we live now. We are surrounded by digital media that keep transforming and allow the emergence of new forms of entertainment. Mobile games, webtoons, and virtual reality are becoming more and more popular. We now use interactive digital technology the whole day to communicate. And it will be certainly part of the future of storytelling as well. Actually, we already have the possibility to interactively create a story with endless possibilities of unfolding, assisted by artificial intelligence technology that can generate a text based on our prompt at every step of the story. But note that this is still a textual story. Yes, it's interactive, but it's missing the audiovisual richness that we love the most. But here comes the twist. We now also have AI models that can generate images and videos from a text prompt. This is amazing. There are tons of new creative possibilities that can come with this advancement. But what about the metaverse? This is a two-dimensional video. How do we bring the interactivity of AI-generated images into a three-dimensional virtual world? Well, I'm not giving you the solution yet. Before we get there, let's take a step back and ask ourselves, do we really enjoy so-and-so stories generated by AI models? Most of the times, these stories do not make much sense, and the short clip I just showed you isn't that good either. So why bother and read or watch stories with this kind of elements when we have much better human storytellers? Well, technology evolves, and people like to experiment and do new things with it. Eventually, virtual and augmented reality will become common technologies, accessible to everybody and much easier to use than they are now. So I think it will be inevitable that we start telling each other stories in the metaverse, taking advantage of all its media affordances. VR is a medium with a great potential. It can increase the sense of presence when doing an activity or watching a story. It can help to be more immersed in comparison to other media, with a more focused attention and stronger emotional response. It can increase engagement, since VR is fun. It can help to take the perspective of another person, better understanding their situation, their emotions, and their thoughts. And it can also help to memorize, since the use of visuals and 3D space is more effective than just text. I'm not just repeating buzzwords here. There is at least 20 years of research supporting my claims. But note that VR is not magic. It is not the medium in itself that can do all these things. The user experience has to be designed in a proper way in order to achieve the desired results. For instance, if you want to use VR for memorizing, it is important to design an experience in which there is an association between the elements in a 3D space and the location of the text to be memorized, so that you can use this link to better remember the text. But let's come to our central topic, storytelling. Why not take advantage of these affordances of VR in order to make stories more captivating? This is the goal of my research, finding the best way to use VR to make storytelling more appealing. I will share with you some insights, but first I want to show you some solutions that have been developed over the years. One of the big VR companies, the Chinese HTC, released in 2016 an app called Vive Paper. It was a way of augmenting the reading experience of magazines with pictures, videos, or 3D models that can be seen through a VR headset. This is a very interesting example because they decided to keep the material aspect of reading on paper as part of the VR experience. So the user holds a paper support, and to turn a page in VR, they have to actually turn the paper page. Well, despite the big investment and the partnership with a big publisher at the time, it was not very successful. The app is not maintained anymore. In the same year, an independent developer released an app called Chimera Reader, where users can upload their own ebooks, choosing between a couple of different indoor environments in which to read them. Apart from generic reading apps like the two I showed you, there are also apps designed for specific stories, like the famous poem The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, for instance. In this case, since the environment is conceived for a single story, it is designed to match its horror atmosphere, with a raven on the chair and creepy paintings on the wall. The three solutions I just showed you have a big limitation in common. They all replicate the shape of printed books, with pages. The people who designed these apps looked at the shape of traditional paper books for inspiration. But copying conventions across media is usually not a good idea. Luckily, not everybody is approaching this topic in the same way. And storytelling in VR can also become art, something that is usually called electronic literature or digital fiction. This work is called Fireboard, and it's a mix of ballet, literature, and game. While you listen to a story, you can follow creatures dancing around you and interact with them, being involved in the unfolding of the story. Queer Skins VR looks more like a film, with the editing of different scenes, but you mainly listen to a story. You can also interact with some objects, and part of the story has to be read. One of the most elaborate works I've seen is called Afid. Here the authors model the shape of the text as spires that revolve around and inside sculpture. There are solutions for comics too. Madefire is the most popular one, also having partnerships with important publishers. Here there is a blending of two-dimensional drawings and animation, so the legacy of the page format is still visible, but in some cases the drawings have been transformed into 360 degrees images that surround the reader. SphereTune is an app that is specialized in the stories even more. They abandoned the concept of page and created stories unfolding in 3D space, using simple animations of the drawings and editing effects similar to that of movies. Interestingly, they keep using the text and not a narrating voice. I showed you examples of what can be done in designing reading experiences for VR. What I showed you has been created by artists, developers, and media companies. But I'm a researcher, and I have a slightly different perspective on this. My job is to understand how things work and what effect they have on people. So the questions I ask myself are, how is storytelling in VR different from reading on paper or on a mobile phone? Are we really more immersed in stories when we experience them in VR? What are the psychological and emotional processes involved in VR storytelling? Answering these kind of questions allows us to better understand our cognitive and aesthetic experience with media, so that we can improve the design of VR apps, identify the positive effects they can have, and suggest possible uses that will benefit more people. My interest is in uses of VR for entertainment and education. What I want to understand is what kind of VR design can make storytelling a more interesting and intense activity. In order to answer these questions and bring evidence of the effects of VR, we need to gain insight from users' reactions to the use of media, and do experiments to measure and compare different media experiences. To approach things step by step, we started experimenting with a very simple prototype. A 360 degrees picture with pages that can be moved with gaze control. Before, I criticized the choice of replicating the page format in VR. But in this case, I had to stick to it because I wanted to test the effect of using a VR headset to read in a format not too different from a paper book. And I also wanted to see if the association between environments and story has any effects on readers. Well, the results show that people who read in VR enjoyed it more and are more willing to continue reading. Not bad. This is a sign that maybe VR could indeed be used to make reading fiction more appealing. But this prototype was not enough, of course. I also wanted to take advantage of the audiovisual and interactive affordances of VR. That's why I started exploring other possibilities and developed an app to listen to audiobooks in VR. So, no more reading the text, but listening to the story. With the collaboration of professional artists, we designed a series of 3D environments with the aim of creating an atmosphere that can help to focus on the reading experience and decrease the absorption into the story. A 19th century foggy alley at night is suitable for horror and mystery stories, for instance. An underwater cave for adventures and pirate stories. A spacecraft for science fiction. And a fourth environment we design is a hut by the river, which is more neutral and has been conceived as a relaxing place suited for a variety of stories. The app is specifically designed to create a distraction-free moment dedicated to stories. For this reason, the user experience and interface have purpose-driven limitation. It is a seated experience with movements limited to 3 degrees of freedom. There's a panel in which users can choose an environment and an audiobook. Ambient sounds have been carefully selected and mixed to increase immersion. Every environment has its own specific background sounds and audio reverb zone that simulates the different spatial reflection of sound in each environment. Again, we designed it to help users focus on the reading experience and increase the absorption into the story. But rather than describing it, I think it's better to show it to you.
Faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, darkness, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering. Long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before.
The feedback we received from our first users is very positive, and it's an encouraging sign that careful design can make storytelling engaging even with a limited selection of stimuli, like in our case. Note that we didn't use any audiovisual element representing the content of the story. We only used sounds and space to help the imagination of the audience. And it works. But of course, there are more possibilities. And here, artificial intelligence comes into play again. One idea is to introduce a virtual agent that can function as a narrator, someone in the same space as the user who is telling the story, not just a voice-over. Having an agent that embodies the narrating voice will likely increase the sense of presence in the VR environment. Using AI, the virtual agent can be programmed to have a casual eye contact with the user, and the movement on the lips can be synchronized with the audio of the selected story. Mouth shapes that create lip syncing are based on phonemes, so various sets can be made available and different languages can be simulated. Facial expressions and gestures can be automatically synced to the speech to give appropriate emphasis to the story and create a more positive effect on users. So far, virtual agents could be programmed to interact with users only in predefined ways. But something is changing. Do you remember the text-to-image models I showed you before? Well, they can be used in VR too. Only a few weeks ago, new AI models able to create 3D animations based on a text prompt have been presented. You can try them too following this link, and there are others if you Google them. The potential for storytelling in the metaverse is that a virtual narrator could respond to our voice in real time, not only replying in a way that is meaningful for the progression of the story. It could also move in the space and make a gesture consistent with the story told. In this way, a live performance similar to that of actors in the theater can be introduced, with the addition that in this case, the performance is interactive. AI advancements have a great potential for all arts, and storytelling can benefit from AI models too. This is the future of storytelling in the metaverse, a convergence of narrative media and modalities that do not replace people's imagination, but rather work together with it to create really immersive experiences. Thank you for your attention.